Good afternoon, everyone. It is Sunday. It is August the 9th, 2020. It is currently 12:14 p.m. Central Time. Just about 5 minutes ago, I finished the morning sermon. We looked at Proverbs chapter 3. You can listen to that under the VBC podcast. This morning for Sunday school, we looked at Psalm 37. That's also under the VBC podcast. I was getting ready to pack up and go back home so I could eat lunch, but I got a notification on my iPad, and I looked at the story, and I'm like, okay, I'll at least stop what I'm doing and at least play this news story for everyone and at least offer a few thoughts. Obviously, let's just remember this. Right now, mentioning the words COVID-19 around Christians leads to debate, dispute, and argument, which is sad. We need, we've got to work on trying to get I gave everyone a COVID-19 toolkit, some scriptures that you really need to really remember and to think about in light of what's happening in our world. But I just want to continue to look at what's going on. First, I'm going to read you a news story because as soon as I sat back down and got ready to go live, I got another notification. So I got two notifications almost back to back, really three notifications. I'm looking at a bunch of them right here. Here's the first one. United States hits 5 million coronavirus cases as debate lingers over the path forward. All right. The U.S. continues to lead the world in both cases and deaths as states across the Midwest and South battle a surge in new cases. So we've hit 5 million coronavirus cases. We're leading the world in both cases and deaths. And everyone's debating what's the path forward. Well, the world, politicians, they're going to debate on the path forward. The question is, for Christians and for the church, what is the path forward? That's going to become more and more difficult. And then this notification, it does not give you the warm fuzzies. COVID-19 may never go away with or without a vaccine. Yeah, that's a little troubling. COVID-19 may never go away with or without a vaccine. Humans have never been particularly good at eradicating entire viruses, and COVID-19 might not be any different. More than 19 million people have tested positive for the coronavirus globally, and at least 722,000 have died. I want you to hear that. 722,000 have died. I'm telling you, we're going to get to that million number, that 1 million people have died. And remember, we weren't even really talking about this in December of 2019. So basically from January to August, we're getting close to hitting 1 million people dead. All right. And I remember when everyone was saying, hey, it's just like the flu. It's just like the flu. It's just like the flu. We're almost 1 million people dead. And the virus, we're not even done with the pandemic. Many people keep predicting a second wave. So, those numbers are crazy. In the United States, nearly 5 million people have tested positive. Okay, and more than 160,000 have died. While scientists are racing to find a cure for the virus, there's a chance. Are you ready? COVID-19 will never fully go away with or without a vaccine. This comes to us from npr.org. I'll probably play the audio of this report at a later time, but this raises the question, what's the path forward? What's the path forward for the country? What's the path forward for the politicians? What's the path forward for business? What's the path forward for churches? How do we operate if it's never going to go away? Now, obviously, saying it's never going to go away doesn't mean that it's going to have it's going to be at the same level of severity that it is now. Obviously, hopefully a vaccine will lessen some of that. But yes, we're going to have to figure this path forward. So the question is, how are Christians thinking? What's their perception? What's kind of happening in the Christian world right now? Well, let's listen to this report because it at least looks at it from a church Christian perspective. Let's listen to this. Here we go.
A new survey has some interesting findings on how the coronavirus pandemic has affected the way Americans think about going to church. The Pew Research Center says most Americans seem comfortable with restrictions placed on worship services. NPR's Tom Gelton reports.
By a 4-to-1 margin, Americans in the Pew survey say houses of worship should have to follow the same rules on public gatherings that apply to other institutions in their local area.
All right, let's stop right there. Here's point number one. Most Americans, 4-1 margin, says, hey, churches, you're not special. If the restrictions are for the rest of us in bars, concerts, movie theaters, then why do you get to have 1,000 people packed in there? I really want to drive this point home because this is the point I've been trying to make. And this fits in with what I was just preaching in my sermon. Look, we don't want to do things that are just going to irritate, agitate, and create anger and animosity towards the church when they view us as simply flaunting the rules, flaunting the regulations, that we can do what we want and that we can put people's lives at risk. That will create an animosity and a backlash against us. And listen, Christians have been talking about persecution is coming. Persecution is coming. It may be coming, but if I'm persecuted, I want to be persecuted for the proclamation of the gospel. If I'm persecuted, I want to be persecuted for preaching the cross. If I'm persecuted, I want to be persecuted for preaching biblical morality. I don't want to be persecuted because I'm being perceived by the culture that I just don't have to follow rules because I'm a church and I don't have to listen to anybody else, and then I put people's lives at risk. That's the last thing I want. That's the last thing. Remember, in Korea, the church that was at the center of a lot of that, the spread of the coronavirus, and was being blamed a lot, there were people who wanted to bring murder charges against that church. I don't want murder charges brought against my church. That's the last thing we want. Just please note, it seems like the majority of people are like, hey, church, yeah, you think you're special, but you're not. Now, I know from a theological perspective, we could wait a minute. We believe we have biblical guidelines that we are told to gather, and we're told to do that. Now, the key is, if you feel that you have to meet, then what are you going to do to try to ensure the city, the town, the people who live around you, that you are doing everything you can to ensure that you don't spread or hurt them? You've got to give them some kind of assurance. And the way the church has acted, who cares about those lost people? Who cares? Well, who cares? We're supposed to care. They're supposed to be the people we are worried about. They're supposed to be the people that we're trying to pray for, that we want to see evangelized. They're the people we're supposed to show love to. So we have to care. I just want you to see that. I think there's going to be a divide that's going to continue to create a schism. The world's going to look at the church and go, you don't care about us. You don't care about anybody else. You think you're special, and that's going to create hostility. We don't want to create unwarranted hostility. I'm not saying we are to compromise biblical mandates at all. I just think we are going to have to figure out maybe how we can carry out certain biblical mandates in a way that doesn't create concern, panic, and hatred to the world around us, as long as we don't compromise Scripture. I'm not saying we change what we preach. Don't misquote me here. We have to stand strong. But I just think this is interesting. Let's listen to what else they have to say. The world definitely sees, hey, we should be following the rules. Let's see if they give us any church statistics.
No special dispensation or exemptions. That holds across all religious denominations and for Republicans and Democrats alike, or generally alike. More Republicans than Democrats think churches should be given extra flexibility in reopening. But even so, 2/3 of Republicans don't think houses of worship deserve special treatment.
Wow. Even 2/3 of Republicans don't believe churches should be given any special exemptions. Typically Republicans church, there's sometimes always that joke that they're, the same thing. That means this is a lot of people think this way. And as Christians, we have to at least consider this. I'm not saying that the world's opinion does not determine what the church does. You're misinterpreting me if you're hearing me, if you think that's what I'm saying. I'm not. I'm saying we have to at least be aware that there is a growing majority going, hey, churches, you can't just open and do what you want. And we're going to have to think that through. Let's see what else they have to say.
Important finding concerns how church attendance patterns will be changed by this pandemic. Clara Gasevich was the lead researcher on the Pew survey.
So about 8 in 10 U.S. adults say basically that their habits won't change after the outbreak. They say either that they intend to go to religious services in person at the same rate as they did before the outbreak, or that they just didn't go to services before the outbreak and they don't intend to go after.
Of the other 20%, some say they'll be more inclined to attend church when the pandemic is over. A few say they'll be less likely. Another interesting finding, 2 out of 3 regular churchgoers say they think it's now safe to resume in-person worship, that they can do so without catching or spreading the coronavirus. Still, Gusevich says there are some distinctions.
We do see some divisions on this question between racial and ethnic groups and also among religious groups.
With respect to religious groups, Catholics and evangelical Protestants are more ready than other Christians to return to regular worship. Catholics are obligated under church teachings to attend Mass weekly. Evangelical Protestants may be generally less deferential to government authority.
We also see a similar breakdown among racial and ethnic groups. White worshipers are much more confident that it is safe to go to religious services right now than Black and Hispanic worshipers.
That's logical. Blacks and Hispanics have been hit harder by COVID-19. They're more likely to be essential workers, so they have more exposure while on the job. Plus, many live in extended family households. No surprise, they're less inclined to take any added risk at church. Tom Gelton, NPR News.
All right, so that's some interesting findings there. I thought it was interesting and maybe a good sign that it sounds like about 80% their church habits are not going to change. Now, on one side, that's sad because you were hoping that during the pandemic, maybe a lot of people would start questioning the existence of God and truth and morality and death, and that because of hopefully more churches getting teaching out there online, that they would come across that teaching and then be inclined to come to church after the pandemic. It appears that we didn't accomplish. In other words, I know that there are these churches out there saying 150 billion people professed, faith in Christ last Sunday on our live stream. I keep seeing that everywhere. 100,000, 100 people, 500 people, 1,000 people, all these numbers of how many people supposedly made a profession of faith. Well, clearly, if they made a profession of faith, according to at least the latest statistics we have, they're not going to be coming back. They're not going to be coming to your church when you reopen. So, if they made a profession of faith, they're not coming to church. So that's very discouraging. We didn't make any ground that way. But at the same time, it's encouraging because I was afraid that a lot of people were going to be like, hey, I've been going to church sitting at home during the pandemic. Why should I bother going back to church after the pandemic? So that's encouraging, but we will see how long the numbers last. Here's what we have to, and I do think it's interesting from the racial situation. I think this is important. If your church is predominantly white, and if whites haven't been hit as hard with COVID as, say, African Americans and Latinos, well, guess what? Your church may be like, hey, what's the problem? We should reopen. Well, we'll slow down. Yeah, maybe because you haven't been impacted by it, but you can't just think about yourself. This is what I keep saying. Christians have to have a different mindset. We don't just think about ourselves. We think about others. So how are others going to look at this? So this is, I think, very important. I think the racial divide is interesting, but I think here's a very important point. 2 out of 3, it seems, churchgoers are like, hey, we're safe. Let's go back. 1 out of 4, but the culture is like, no, churches should not be given any special dispensations and should not be able to do anything. So it's very interesting. A growing number of people in the church are like, hey, we can go back now. It's safe. We don't have nothing to worry about. So that mindset means they may not even feel like they need to take any precautions. They're not going to wear a mask. They may not do social distancing, which could make them then become a source of spread. So I think that's interesting. The world looks at it as, hey, you don't get any special rights. If everybody else still have to follow rules, you got to follow rules. Who do you think you are? You see that animosity? That's what I want. That's what I don't want. I don't want animosity because of a mask, social distancing, and a pandemic. They're going to hate us for the cross. That's okay. That's what we have to be on the lookout for. So we've got some good news there. Sounds like most are going to come back to church. The bad news is that we didn't gain any people coming back to church, even though all these mega churches claim that hundreds and hundreds of people are making professions of faith. I don't know then. These people are not Christians. I guess they're not going to come to church. They're just going to watch online. I don't know how that's going to work. I remember I've been concerned about how this could all impact the church moving forward. I don't know. Here's what I would say. I think we've reached we're at a tipping point here. Right? I think we're maybe even beyond the tipping point, but we're right here. And here's where we are. I think most churches, many churchgoers are just done. They don't care if 1 million people die. They don't care. They're done. They're done with the restrictions, and they're just ready to get back to church. And I think many pastors are done fighting about it and ready to get back to church and want this to be over. I do not know what happens if we get a major surge, like just a massive surge in September, October, November, December. If we end up with multiple months to end 2020 with churches being shut down and all kinds of problems and restrictions all over the place, I don't know I think we may then see a major change in attitudes towards church by the time we get to 2021. I still think the church is going to be, I think there's going to be some impacts that come from this. I don't know what they are. Those are positive signs. Hey, most people are going to return. That's a positive thing. We will see if that holds true. We will see if that holds true. We will see if churches, I think we are going to see this. I think we are going to see an increase. And I think this is going to be true societal. I think this is going to be a change in society that from now on, if people are just a little sick, they're not coming to church. If they're a little sick, they're not going to work. I think there's going to be a lot of that. Who knows? Maybe that won't impact the church. Maybe people are still going to come. I don't know. But these are the kinds of things that you're going to keep looking out for. Just keep watching. So I'll end with this. Here's the things I want you to realize. There is a divide, very evident divide, that the people in the world are like, hey, churches, you're not special. Get over yourself. If we're restricted, you're restricted. You shouldn't be given any special dispensation. So if you're opening, that means a lot of people around you are not looking at that as a positive thing or a good thing. Now, you may believe you're being biblical, but then you, I think, have a responsibility to try to demonstrate to them that you're doing everything you can because you're doing this because you believe it's biblical, but we're going to do everything in our power. We're going to go above and beyond to ensure that we are not a source of spread and of infecting other people and hurting other people. I think that's basic Bible. You give up your rights for the benefits of other people. You demonstrate love to other people. We have to think about we cannot be so self-centered. We cannot be. All right. So I think that's important. So that divide is happening. Also, just please note there's a racial divide. If you're a predominantly white church and you're not been impacted by COVID-19 as much as maybe some African-American communities and Latinos have been, you've got to be at least sensitive to their experience. Once again, we get back to this white experience versus another race's experience. We're human beings. So let's understand other people's experience to the best of our ability. It is a good sign. It is a good sign that most people saying, hey, when church opens back up, I'm right there. I'm not going to be any less inclined to go. Thank goodness. That's a good sign. However, be very skeptical now when you're hearing all these people claiming hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people are making professions of faith during online church services. Because if they're making these professions, well, as of right now, we have no statistical evidence that they're going to actually go to church when the doors open. Maybe the statistics haven't caught up yet. It would be I would love to get the names of the people who make a profession of faith online and then find out if they're going to church. Or are they just clicking a button saying, hey, I made a profession of faith, and it's just anyone clicking the button to increase numbers? Like, I don't know. So I thought it was I wanted to bring all of this to your attention. You're going to have your own interpretation. Now, please note, we're trying to figure out how this is going to impact the church. I'm not trying to debate. I'm not trying to argue about a mask, no mask. People will just start emailing me wanting to attack me about that. You're missing the point. I'm trying to figure out what is the church going to look like but when we get to 2021. Right? How is this going to impact the church? Are churches going to survive? What's going to happen? Are they going to look different? Are they going to meet differently? What's going to happen? There are lots of questions we have to ask, and I think churches need to have be looking to the future and trying to figure out what we need to do to be in a right place at the right time, to be able to be effective in our ministry, and to be able to conduct and handle ourselves in a godly way. So I'll stop right there. Just wanted to bring this to your attention. That's some of the latest news dealing with the church and COVID-19. You interpret it. You can email me at newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. Get your predictions on the record. How do you think it's going to impact the church? How many churches do you think are not going to survive? Are there going to be church splits? Are some people not going back to church? We do have statistics of lots of people changing churches during the pandemic, which is interesting. So let me know your thoughts and how this is all going to play out. Get your predictions down, all right? I can keep your prediction, and then we'll see which predictions turn out to be the most right and who we should have listened to, all right? So we'll stop right there. Everyone have a great day. I'll probably be back this afternoon with some live broadcasting here from Victory Baptist Church. God bless. Be safe. Look out for one another.